Tom sat at his kitchen table, the faint smell of coffee hanging in the air, as he flipped through the mail. Bills, a few catalogs, junk, and then there was a thick official envelope, the kind he had never expected to receive. Its seal was imprinted with gold, an unfamiliar crest he couldn't place. His curiosity piqued. He tore it open, only to find a letter that would change everything. The letter began with a formal tone, explaining that a distant relative, someone Tom had never heard of, had passed away. The letter continued, stating that Tom had been named the sole beneficiary of his inheritance. He expected to read about property, money, or at least something substantial. But then his eyes froze on the next line. You have inherited the sum of $1. $1. Tom blinked, unsure if his eyes were deceiving him. He read the line again, then glanced at Max, his golden retriever, who lay by the fireplace, wagging his tail. Can you believe this, Max? $1, Tom said, laughing under his breath. Guess I'm richer than I thought. Max barked in agreement, his tail wagging faster, as if enjoying the absurdity. Tom shook his head, chuckling again. The thought of a long-lost relative leaving him $1, it was just too ridiculous. But as the laughter faded, an uncomfortable curiosity began to creep in. Why had he been chosen? What was the meaning behind this bizarre inheritance? $1 couldn't possibly be all there was to it. But what else was hidden beneath the surface? Tom's had told him there was more to this story, more than the dollar, more than the letter. And the next morning, he'd start looking for answers. Tom's heart raced as he looked at the letter again. $1. That was the inheritance he'd received from a distant relative he'd never even heard of. Who leaves a single dollar to someone? It didn't make sense. He could barely suppress the chuckle that bubbled up again. It felt absurd. But somewhere in the back of his mind, something gnawed at him. Maybe there was more to this story than the dollar. The next morning, he decided to pay a visit to the law firm mentioned in the letter. If nothing else, he'd get clarification on the bizarre inheritance. Max, his ever-loyal golden retriever, seemed to sense that something important was about to happen. The dog sat quietly by Tom's feet, looking up with those soulful brown eyes, as if ready to join him on yet another adventure. The drive to the law firm was uneventful. The road stretched before him, the trees on either side casting long shadows in the early morning light. Tom couldn't help but reflect on his life. A retired war veteran, he'd always been used to working hard with his hands and taking care of his own. His life had been quiet and peaceful, filled with routine. But now, all of a sudden, the world was pushing him into a strange, unexpected path. When he arrived, he was greeted by a man in his 60s, neatly dressed in a suit that seemed a little too formal for the casual environment Tom was used to. The law office was small but well-kept, with dark wood paneling and bookshelves filled with old law books. Mr. Tom, I presume? The lawyer's voice was warm, yet there was an unmistakable air of authority. I'm Mr. Harold. I've been expecting you. Tom shook the man's hand firmly. You've been expecting me? I thought this was a mix-up. Honestly. I mean, who leaves someone $1? Mr. Harold smiled, a glint of something more in his eyes. Ah, yes, the $1. Please have a seat. Let me explain. Tom sat down across from the lawyer, his curiosity mounting. Max, ever the obedient companion, lay down beside him on the floor, his ears perked as if he too sensed that something significant was unfolding. The letter you received wasn't meant to be taken at face value, Mr. Harold began. You see, your distant relative, Mr. Augustus Warren, didn't just leave behind money. He left behind a legacy. The $1 you received is a symbol. It is a first step in unlocking something far greater. And I believe you're the one chosen to uncover it. Tom's heart skipped a beat. What are you talking about? An inheritance that's more than just $1. Mr. Harold nodded. Exactly. Mr. Warren was a man of great wealth and influence in his time. But his greatest achievement was not in the money he accumulated. It was in something far more valuable. He amassed a hidden estate, a place known only to a select few. The $1 you received is the key to finding it. Tom's brow furrowed. A hidden estate? Why would he hide it? And why me? I don't know this guy. Your family's history is tied to this estate. You are the descendant of Augustus Warren's brother, who was estranged from the family many years ago. When Warren died, he left a series of clues behind, hoping that one day someone with the right heart and mind would find it. And that someone, Mr. Tom, is you. Tom's mind was spinning. A hidden estate, a legacy, clues scattered across time. It all sounded like something straight out of a mystery novel. But the lawyer's serious expression told him this wasn't a joke. This wasn't some prank or a mistake. This was real. How do I even begin? Tom asked, his voice thick with confusion and a touch of excitement. Mr. Harold slid a worn piece of paper across the desk. It was a map, old and yellowed, the ink faded with age. This is the map that was passed down through your family. It contains the first clue, the location of the estate. Follow it and you'll find your way. Tom stared at the map. It was marked with strange symbols, landmarks he didn't recognize, and pathways that seemed to lead deep into the wilderness. The edges were frayed, and the ink was blotchy in some places, but it was undeniably old. It felt like a piece of history in his hands. This is the key, Tom, Mr. Harold said softly. Follow the map, solve the riddles, and the estate will be yours. But be warned, it won't be easy. There are obstacles along the way, and not everyone wants you to find it. Tom's stomach tightened. Obstacles? What kind of obstacles? The lawyer leaned forward slightly, his voice dropping. There are others who are aware of this state. Tom, they won't make it easy for you to find. You must be careful. Tom glanced down at Max, who was staring up at him, his tail wagging slowly. The dog seemed to understand that this journey would be something important, something that would change their lives. Are you sure about this? Tom asked, his voice filled with skepticism. I mean, it sounds like something out of a storybook. A hidden estate, family secrets, and clues to find it. How can I know this is real? Mr. Harold gave a small smile. You'll know soon enough, Mr. Tom. You'll know soon enough. Tom drove home, his mind racing with thoughts of the lawyer's words. Was it possible? A hidden estate? The idea seemed far-fetched, but the map in his hands felt real enough. As he pulled up to his cottage, Max jumped out of the car and ran to the door, clearly eager to get inside. Tom followed him, still holding the map, unsure of what he was about to do next. That night, after a dinner of leftovers and a quiet walk with Max, Tom sat down in his study to examine the map more closely. He spread it out on the table, the yellowed paper crinkling under his fingers. There were markings, some familiar, others completely foreign. A thick line ran across the page, suggesting a path to follow. At the end of the path was a symbol, a key, etched into the map in bold black ink. Tom traced the path with his finger, starting from a point near his own town. The route seemed to lead into the dense forest that bordered the area, then curved north toward a place called the Forgotten Vale. The Forgotten Vale? Tom didn't recognize the name, but something about it made him shiver with both unease and excitement. Max curled up on the floor beside him, as if sensing that this map would lead to something significant. Tom looked at the dog, who stared up at him with knowing eyes. Well, buddy, looks like we've got ourselves an adventure. The thought of it all seemed ridiculous. A hidden estate, clues, riddles. But something in his gut told him it wasn't a joke. There was something bigger at play here, something that had been waiting for him, buried in his family's past. He set the map down on the table and stood up. Max immediately got to his feet, his tail wagging. All right, Max, Tom said, feeling the weight of the moment. We're going to follow this map, and we're going to find out what's hidden in that forgotten vale. The next morning, Tom packed a bag with supplies, including water, snacks, and a flashlight, along with the map. It wasn't a long drive to the edge of the forest, but the tension in the air was thick as they got closer. The roads grew narrower, and the trees grew taller, their branches stretching high into the sky, casting long, eerie shadows over the car. Tom parked near the edge of the forest, and together, he and Max set off along the trail marked on the map. The path was narrow and winding, cutting through the thick underbrush. The forest was quiet, almost too quiet, and the air was damp with the scent of earth and moss. As they ventured deeper into the woods, Tom couldn't shake the feeling that they weren't alone. Every rustling leaf, every snap of a twig underfoot seemed to echo in the silence. Max was on high alert, his ears perked, eyes scanning the area around them. The dog had a way of sensing danger. Tom trusted him more than he trusted himself sometimes. But they pressed on, driven by the mystery, the need to uncover what lay ahead. The forest grew denser, the path more difficult to follow. Yet, the deeper they went, the more certain Tom became that they were on the right track. The map led them to a clearing, where a dilapidated stone archway stood at the entrance to what appeared to be an abandoned estate. Its stone pillars were crumbling, the once majestic arch now barely standing. Vines crept over the stone, obscuring the markings on the pillars. Tom felt a shiver run down his spine. This was it. They had found it. Max barked, pulling at the leash as if urging Tom forward. Tom hesitated for a moment, then stepped through the archway, feeling as though he were stepping into another world. And just like that, the hidden estate had been uncovered. The journey had only just begun. The moment Tom stepped through the crumbling stone archway, the air shifted. It was as though they had crossed into another world, one where time had forgotten to tick. The overgrown vines twisted and turned in unnatural patterns, as though they were trying to conceal the entrance or perhaps protect it from unwanted visitors. Tom glanced at Max, whose fur bristled slightly, but his tail remained steady. The dog seemed calm, but there was an unmistakable alertness in his eyes. Something was different here. The estate stretched before them like a forgotten relic. Its grandeur only hinted at through the ruins that had once been magnificent. Towering stone walls, their surfaces covered in moss and ivy, stood as silent sentinels guarding the estate's secrets. There were no signs of life, no birds, no sound of animals in the trees. The air felt heavy, almost oppressive, and a faint chill lingered in the breeze. Tom looked around, his heart pounding in his chest. The path ahead of them was overgrown, but it was clear that someone at some point had cared for this place. The remnants of ornate stone carvings could be seen around the arches and doorways. It was as if the estate had been abandoned in a hurry, its purpose lost to history. Max, ever the curious companion, trotted ahead with his usual sense of purpose, sniffing the ground and occasionally looking back at Tom. He stopped at a set of stone steps that led up to a weathered door. The door, made of dark oak, seemed far older than anything Tom had ever seen. It was adorned with intricate carvings that were almost too faint to make out, yet there was something strangely familiar about the symbols. They reminded Tom of the ones on the map. Tom hesitated for a moment, his hand on the old iron doorknob. A deep, instinctual sense of foreboding warned him to be cautious, but the curiosity that had driven him here pushed him forward. He turned the knob, and the door creaked open, revealing a grand hall. The interior was dark, its once gilded chandeliers long since reduced to rusted skeletons. Dust hung thick in the air, suspended in the slivers of light that managed to filter through the cracked windows. The floors were made of dark wood, covered in a layer of grime and dust. Yet, despite the decay, there was a strange, almost haunting beauty to the space. The once ornate furniture was now broken and abandoned, its upholstery torn and faded. Tom couldn't help but wonder how long it had been since anyone had set foot in this room. Max entered first, his paws tapping softly on the floor. He padded through the hall, his nose twitching as he explored every corner. Tom followed, feeling a mix of awe and unease. As they moved deeper into the mansion, he couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. Every creak of the floorboards, every gust of wind rattling the windows, seemed to amplify the eerie silence. At the far end of the hall, a grand staircase spiraled upward, its once polished banister now covered in layers of dust. Tom's eyes were drawn to the staircase, and without thinking, he began to climb. Max followed, his paws light on the worn steps. The house seemed to breathe around them, and Tom couldn't ignore the feeling that they weren't alone. His mind raced with questions. What happened here? Why had this place been abandoned? And what was the significance of the inheritance? At the top of the stairs, they arrived in a long corridor. The walls were lined with paintings, all shrouded in shadow. Tom stopped in front of one painting, its faded canvas depicting a man in old-fashioned clothes, the same man he'd seen in the portrait at the law office, Augustus Warren. Tom's heart skipped a beat. This was the same man who had left him the $1, the same man whose legacy had led him to this forgotten estate. Tom studied the painting, trying to decipher its meaning. The man in the portrait seemed to be staring directly at him, his eyes full of secrets, his mouth curled into an enigmatic smile. Beneath the painting, there was a plaque. Tom leaned forward to read it. The key to the past is always hidden in plain sight. Tom's brow furrowed. What did that mean? Was this a riddle? A clue? As he pondered the words, Max barked, pulling at the leash, his body tense. Tom turned to look, and his gaze landed on a door at the end of the hall. It was slightly ajar, just enough to catch his attention. Something about it felt different from the other doors. He felt drawn to it, a strange compulsion urging him forward. With Max by his side, Tom walked toward the door, his footsteps echoing through the corridor. As he approached, he noticed that the door was made of a different material than the others. The wood was darker, and the carvings were deeper, more intricate. There was a faint glow coming from the crack between the door and the frame, almost as if the room beyond was alive with energy. Tom reached for the door handle, his hand trembling slightly. As soon as he touched it, a strange hum vibrated through his fingers, and the door swung open with ease. What lay beyond the door was unlike anything Tom had ever expected. The room was small, but its walls were lined with shelves filled with old books, scrolls, and artifacts. At the far end of the room stood a large wooden chest, its surface covered in dust. The air in the room felt dense, almost charged, as though this was a place of great significance. Tom's eyes were drawn to the chest. It was covered in intricate carvings, similar to those he had seen in the hall, and it seemed almost to pulse with energy. Max moved forward, sniffing around the room. His tail was still, his body stiff with alertness. Tom stepped closer to the chest, his mind racing with questions. Was this it? Was this what he had come for? He knelt down and slowly opened the chest, the hinges creaking loudly in the quiet room. Inside, there were old papers, maps, and letters, some of which were sealed with wax. As Tom carefully sifted through the items, one letter caught his attention. The wax seal was dark, but the symbol was unmistakable. It was the same symbol that had appeared on the map, a key. With trembling hands, Tom broke the seal and opened the letter. The handwriting was elegant, but aged, as if written by someone who had lived many years ago. To my heir, the letter began. If you are reading this, then you are the one who has uncovered the hidden estate. But this is just the beginning. The key to the past is not just a phrase. It is a literal key, a symbol that unlocks the door to your true inheritance. Follow the clues, solve the riddles, and you will discover not just wealth, but knowledge, a power that has been hidden for generations. The final piece of the puzzle lies within the forgotten veil. You must go there to claim what is yours. Tom's breath caught in his throat. The letter confirmed everything he had been suspecting. This wasn't just about money. It was about something far more valuable. And it all pointed to the forgotten veil, the very place the map had led him to. Max barked again, breaking Tom's trance. The dog's eyes were wide, his body tense as he stared toward the far corner of the room. Tom followed his gaze, his heart racing as he saw something strange. There on the wall was a hidden compartment, a small door, barely visible beneath the dust. Tom moved toward it, his hand trembling as he pushed it open. Inside, he found a small, ornate box. The box was made of gold, its surface covered in delicate engravings. Tom lifted the lid, and inside he found a key that looked identical to the one in the portrait, the one that had appeared on the map. The key, the symbol, it was all coming together. Tom stood up, his mind reeling. This was it, the final clue, the key to unlocking the true inheritance. But what was it? What lay ahead for him and Max in the forgotten veil? As he tucked the key into his pocket, a sudden realization washed over him. They weren't alone in the estate. Someone had been watching them. Someone who didn't want them to uncover the truth. Tom turned to Max, the dog's gaze mirroring his own unease. "We have to be careful, Max," Tom whispered. "This is just the beginning." The key, cool and heavy in Tom's hand, was the final piece of the puzzle. It felt like destiny, or perhaps more fittingly, like a test. But what lay beyond this key? What secrets would it reveal? The answer seemed closer now, yet the questions were multiplying in his mind with each passing moment. It was clear that he was no longer just exploring a forgotten estate. He was embarking on something much larger, something hidden for generations, perhaps even centuries. Max's growl broke the silence, low and steady, as if the dog sensed danger looming in the shadows. Tom turned to him, seeing his fur bristle and his body tense. Something was wrong. "Easy, boy," Tom murmured, his voice low, trying to calm the dog, though he couldn't shake the feeling that the house itself was holding its breath, waiting. There were only so many paths left to explore in this old mansion, and Tom couldn't ignore the eerie silence that pervaded the halls. Every room he had entered had revealed more of the estate's mystery, but each new discovery only brought more questions. The estate had once belonged to Augustus Warren, but why had it been abandoned? What had he been hiding? And why was it Tom who had been chosen to unravel the mystery? Max growled again, more urgently this time, and Tom felt a shiver run down his spine. Slowly, he turned back to the chest he had just opened, placing the golden key inside his jacket pocket as he made his way toward the next room. The hallway was dark, but Tom had learned to navigate by instinct as much as sight. He felt the weight of the key in his pocket, pressing against him like a secret waiting to be uncovered. As he reached the end of the hallway, another door stood before him. Unlike the others, this one had a polished brass handle, gleaming faintly even in the dim light. It looked new, out of place in the decaying atmosphere of the rest of the estate. He hesitated, wondering if he was about to find something he wasn't prepared for. Max barked once, louder this time, as if urging Tom to move forward. Tom exhaled slowly and gripped the handle. It turned easily in his hand, the door opening with a soft creak. He stepped inside. The room was completely different from any of the others. Where the rest of the mansion had been decrepit, dusty, and forsaken, this room was meticulously preserved. It looked as though it had been untouched for years, perhaps decades. Rich red velvet curtains framed the windows, which still allowed a faint trace of sunlight to seep in, illuminating the lavish furniture, all still in place. At the center of the room was an antique desk, covered in papers, books, and other relics of a past time. Everything was organized with precision, down to the placement of each item. It was as though the room had been frozen in time, waiting for someone to come back and finish what had been started long ago. Max trotted into the room, sniffing the air and wagging his tail. There was something almost comforting about the warmth of the room, despite its apparent age. Tom's footsteps echoed softly as he made his way across the polished wooden floor to the desk. On it, there were a series of papers, documents, letters, and journals, all meticulously arranged. Tom flipped through the first few letters, reading their contents with increasing curiosity. They were written in an elegant script dated back more than a century. But one letter, in particular, caught his eye. It was addressed to Augustus Warren, from someone named Miriam Devereux. He quickly scanned the letter. "Augustus, it has been years since our last correspondence, but I hope this letter finds you in good health. The plans are nearly complete. The estate you mentioned, the one hidden from prying eyes, is almost ready. I trust you are prepared for what comes next. The key, however, remains elusive. You will need someone with an unclouded mind to see the final piece. The time is near. Be cautious, my friend." Tom's heart raced as he finished reading. This was it. The mention of the estate, the key, the person with the unclouded mind who would complete the plans. Was he that person? Had Augustus Warren left these instructions behind for him specifically? His thoughts swirled, and he began to feel like he was standing on the edge of something monumental. The room felt charged with energy, the air thick with the weight of years of hidden history. His mind raced as he began to organize the clues in his head. The map, the key, the letter, and now, the mention of Miriam Devereux. Max padded over to the desk, sniffing at a small drawer that was partially open. Tom, still deep in thought, glanced at the dog and followed his gaze. The drawer seemed out of place, almost intentionally left slightly ajar. With his heart pounding, Tom pulled it open. Inside was a small leather-bound journal. Its cover was worn and faded, but the pages inside were pristine. Tom hesitated only for a moment before opening it. The handwriting inside was unmistakable, Augustus Warren's. March 14th, 1912. I have finally found it. The key to unlocking the hidden estate lies within the forgotten veil. The key, in truth, is not just a physical object. It is a concept, a principle that ties together the past, present, and future. My family has guarded this secret for generations, but I am afraid the end is near. My health has begun to fail, and there are those who would seek to claim what is mine. The key is not just an inheritance of wealth, but of knowledge, of untold power. I leave this journal as the last clue. To those who find it, know that you are not alone in your pursuit. There are forces that will do anything to prevent you from discovering the truth. Be prepared. The final test awaits. Tom closed the journal slowly, his hands trembling. The words on the page were clear. The hidden estate was not just a legacy of wealth, but something much more powerful. Knowledge, power, a truth that had been hidden for generations, guarded by his ancestors, and now Tom had become the keeper of that secret. Max whimpered, and Tom's gaze lifted from the journal to the far wall of the room. There, on the opposite side of the desk, was a large portrait of Augustus Warren, but this one was different. The man in the portrait appeared older, wearier, but his expression was one of intense focus. He was standing in front of a large, ornate door, and his hand was outstretched, as if reaching for something just beyond it. Tom's heart skipped a beat as he stared at the painting. There was something strange about the door in the portrait. It wasn't just part of the background. It seemed to pulse with energy, as if it were real. It beckoned him. He moved closer to the painting, feeling an almost magnetic pull. As he reached the frame, something extraordinary happened. The wall behind the painting seemed to shift slightly, and with a soft click, a hidden mechanism was activated. The painting swung open, revealing yet another passage. Max barked once, sharply, as though urging Tom forward. He swallowed hard and stepped through the opening, his mind racing. What could be on the other side of the secret passage? The passage was narrow, dark, and lined with old stone. The walls felt damp to the touch, and the air grew colder the further they went. Tom could hear the sound of his breathing, steady but quick, and Max's soft footsteps beside him. They reached the end of the passage, where a stone door stood, solid and unyielding. There was a symbol etched into the stone, similar to the one on the key, the one that had appeared on the map, the one that had appeared in the letter. Tom's fingers traced the symbol on the door, feeling a strange warmth radiate from the stone. He looked down at the golden key in his hand. It seemed to fit perfectly. There was no turning back now. With a deep breath, Tom inserted the key into the lock. There was a click, and the door creaked open. The door groaned as it swung open, and the moment it did, an overwhelming sense of history flooded the room. Tom stepped cautiously across the threshold, Max padding silently behind him, his keen senses alert. The space beyond the stone door was unlike anything Tom had seen so far. The chamber was vast, and the walls, illuminated by a faint, ethereal glow, were lined with shelves filled with ancient scrolls and books. Unlike the rest of the estate, this room seemed to pulse with an almost palpable energy, as if the very air in here held secrets too powerful to be left unchecked. The room's floor was made of polished marble, a deep shade of black that reflected the dim light from sconces mounted on the walls. The center of the room was dominated by an imposing stone pedestal, upon which lay an object covered in a cloth. The pedestal itself was carved with symbols Tom had seen before, the same strange key-like shapes that had appeared in the letter, on the portrait, and on the map. These markings were not random. They held meaning, a hidden language that had been passed down to the generations. Tom's heart beat faster as he approached the pedestal, feeling a connection between himself and the symbols. It was as though this room had been waiting for him to arrive, and now that he was here, the truth of everything began to unravel in his mind. The key in his pocket felt heavier than ever, its weight almost symbolic of the burden that now rested on his shoulders. Max whined softly, his gaze fixed on the object under the cloth. Tom stopped, standing still for a moment. He could feel the tension in the air. He looked down at Max, the dog's eyes wide and watchful. Max seemed to sense the magnitude of the moment, just as Tom did. He reached out slowly and lifted the cloth. What lay beneath was a large, intricately carved stone box. It was unlike anything Tom had ever seen. The carvings on the box were familiar, the same symbols, the same key-like shapes that had appeared throughout the mansion. This was the heart of the mystery, the final piece of the puzzle Augustus Warren had left behind. With trembling hands, Tom ran his fingers over the stone. It felt warm, almost alive under his touch. As his fingers brushed across the surface, a low hum reverberated through the room, and the box began to shift. The top slowly lifted, revealing a single object inside, a small, ornate crystal. The crystal glowed faintly, its color shifting from blue to green, and then to a brilliant golden hue. Tom felt an overwhelming pull toward it, as if the object was calling to him. He reached inside, carefully lifting the crystal from the box. The moment his fingers made contact with the smooth surface, a wave of energy coursed through him, rushing like electricity through his veins. His vision blurred for a moment, and the world around him seemed to shift. The room, the estate, even time itself, felt as though it was warping, bending, and realigning. And then, as quickly as it had come, the sensation faded. Tom stood still, panting, his heart racing. The crystal in his hand now radiated with a steady glow, and he felt a strange sense of clarity wash over him. He had no words for what he had just experienced. It was as though the crystal had unlocked something within him, some deeper understanding of the estate, of his legacy, of the very forces that had been shaping his journey since the moment he had inherited that dollar. Max barked, pulling Tom's attention away from the crystal. The dog was standing near a wall, his nose pressed to the stone. Tom followed Max's gaze and saw something remarkable. The wall before them was slowly shifting. Stone by stone, the surface of the wall began to slide apart, revealing yet another hidden chamber beyond. The air grew heavier, and Tom felt an instinctive tug toward the opening. The journey was far from over. The true meaning of the crystal, the inheritance, and the legacy of Augustus Warren had only just begun to reveal itself. Stepping to the newly revealed passageway, Tom and Max entered a large underground chamber, lit by the same ethereal glow that had illuminated the pedestal. At the center of the room was a circular table, around which stood several ancient statues. The figures were cloaked in robes, their faces obscured, but their postures were commanding. On the table lay an open book, its pages yellowed with age. The pages were filled with handwritten symbols, each one intricate and deliberate. It was a language Tom didn't recognize, but one that seemed familiar, as if it were embedded in his memory. Tom moved closer to the table, his breath caught in his chest. The book seemed to call to him, and he felt an undeniable need to understand what it contained. He reached out, running his fingers over the pages. As he did, the symbols began to shift and rearrange, the ink on the paper glowing faintly. His mind raced as he tried to make sense of what he was seeing. Suddenly, the voice of Augustus Warren echoed in his mind, the words coming to him unbidden but clear as day. The truth you seek has always been within you, Tom. The key is not just an object, nor is it a legacy of wealth. It is a truth that binds the past and the future, a knowledge that has been hidden from the world. The crystal you hold is the key to unlocking the knowledge of your ancestors. You are the one who must protect it. The future of the estate of this world depends on your understanding. Tom's heart pounded in his chest as the words settled in. The crystal was a key, but it wasn't just for unlocking physical doors. It was a key to knowledge, to understanding a power that had been passed down through the generations, a power that he was now entrusted to protect. Max barked again, his tail wagging with excitement, but there was something more in his eyes now, a sense of purpose. It was as if Max understood, on a deeper level, the significance of what they had uncovered. Tom took a deep breath, his mind racing as he tried to piece together everything he had learned. The estate, the hidden chambers, the crystal, they were all part of a larger puzzle, a puzzle that Tom was now poised to solve. But the true question remained, what was this power, and what did it mean for his future? Tom's gaze shifted back to the book, where the symbols were continuing to shift. He could feel the pulse of the crystal in his hand, resonating with the book's energy. As he stared at the pages, the symbols began to form words that made sense to him, even though he had never seen them before. The book was revealing its secrets to him, its ancient knowledge unfolding before his very eyes. The voice of Augustus Warren spoke again, but this time it wasn't just in Tom's mind. The voice seemed to come from the room itself, filling the space with an undeniable presence. The knowledge you now possess is the key to a new world. You must decide what to do with it. Will you protect it? Will you share it? The decision is yours, but be warned. Not everyone will understand the power you now hold. There will be those who will try to take it from you, to use it for their own gain. You must be prepared to fight for what is right. Tom stood frozen, the weight of the words settling on his shoulders like a heavy burden. He had inherited more than just a mansion, more than just wealth. He had inherited the responsibility of protecting something ancient and powerful, something that could change the world or destroy it. The legacy of Augustus Warren was more than just a name or an inheritance. It was a calling, a mission. With a final deep breath, Tom made his decision. He would protect this knowledge, this legacy, with everything he had. The power that had been entrusted to him was not meant to be hoarded or used recklessly. It was meant to be shared, used wisely, and protected at all costs. Tom turned to Max, who looked up at him with a knowing gaze, as though the dog understood the magnitude of the task ahead. "Let's go, boy," Tom said softly. "We've got a lot of work to do." And as they turned to leave the hidden chamber, the glow of the crystal dimmed just slightly, as though acknowledging the decision Tom had made. The estate, with all its secrets, would now be in his hands.